You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the finale, the last part of the second Doctor story, The War Games, covering episodes 7 to 10. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me as always is Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, be sure to get your very own Secrets of Doctor Who t-shirt, phone case, or other merch by visiting our merchandise store at sqpn.com/merch. Be sure to stick around to the end of the show. We have a bunch of feedback from our listeners, which we are happy to share with you. And so, Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens in the last 4 episodes of the story?
This week, the second Doctor, Jamie, and Lieutenant Carstairs are being crushed by the War Chief inside a side rat. The Doctor says they must surrender, but once outside, the Doctor sets off a gas bomb and is able to reprogram the side rat in the confusion, so the 3 escape. Meanwhile, back in the 1917 zone, Zoe is able to put together an army using the different resistance factions that have begun to escape hypnotic control, and the Doctor puts a barrier around the chateau to turn it into a secure base. However, the Warlord sends a side rat into it, and the Doctor is captured and taken back to headquarters. There, he resists attempts by the security chief to question him, so the war chief takes over the interrogation, and once alone, the war chief explains that the purpose of the war games is to build an army that can conquer the galaxy. He says he's planning on becoming the supreme leader of the resultant empire instead of the warlord, and he offers to co-rule the galaxy with the Doctor if the Doctor helps him, because it turns out that his side rats have a limited lifespan, so he needs the Doctor's TARDIS. He also indicates that this is the only way the Doctor can survive, and they're going to set off a neutron bomb in the 1917 zone, killing everybody there. To save their lives, the Doctor reluctantly summons his friends from the 1917 zone and orders them captured, making the warlords think that he's switched sides. But, in secret, he's leading the resistance fighters to rebel against the warlords. Meanwhile, the security chief has gotten proof from audio recordings that the war chief is plotting against them, and in the fighting, the war chief kills the security chief. Afterwards, he lies and tells the warlord that the resistance fighters killed the security chief, but the warlord doesn't believe him and orders his guards to kill the war chief, which they apparently do. Unable to get all the soldiers back to their home time zones, the Doctor builds a cube to contact the Time Lords, before taking Jamie and Zoe and trying to escape himself. But the Time Lords are too powerful, and they pull the Doctor back to his unnamed home planet. There, the Warlord is on trial for his crimes, and his guards appear and try to rescue him. But the Time Lords impose sentence and disintegrate the Warlord and his guards, while also placing his planet in a permanent force field to isolate it from the galaxy. Afterward, the Doctor must stand trial for interfering with so many races. The Doctor argues that what he did was justified since he was fighting evils that the Time Lords were ignoring. In the end, Jamie and Zoe are returned to their own times with only their memories of their first adventures with the Doctor intact. The Time Lords then say that they agree that the Doctor has a role to play in fighting evil, but he will be exiled to Earth for an indefinite period, and to protect him, his appearance will change again. Before the Doctor can consent to what his new form will look like, he spirals off into the darkness, and the second Doctor's televised adventures seemingly come to a close. The end.
So, Jimmy, we'll I think at the end we'll talk about our overall take on the second Doctor's tenure. I think that would be a good way to do it. But for now, what do you think of this part of the War Games?
Well, I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this rewatch of the 10-part serial. It's got a lot of really interesting stuff going on. It's really cool when you watch it, putting yourself in the mind frame of what the audience knew at the time. Like you'll notice I mentioned his home planet is still unnamed in this. We see it, but it doesn't have a name. And we hear Time Lord for the first time. Also, watching this set of 4 episodes, I was even more convinced that the War Chief just is the master. This is a pre-Roger Delgado master. And also, it's just a really well done serial, and I enjoyed it.
It really felt like 2 things. This this block of stories, these episodes. 7 to 9 is the resistance, the part of the story where the resistance rises up to fight back. And then 10 is just the Time Lords. This is a separate story almost.
That was one thing that struck me is they basically wrap up the War Games plot in episode 9, and then episode 10 is all Fallout. It's all dealing with the Time Lords.
Right. Exactly. One of the things I thought was interesting was the mention of neutron bombs, the use of it, and it reminded me that
explain it. They just use the term as if people know what a neutron bomb is. For people who may not be aware, neutron bombs release neutron radiation, and so they destroy biological tissue, but they don't create massive kinetic explosions. And so you could drop a neutron bomb in a city and kill people, but leave the building standing and usable.
Right. It seemed like a much bigger deal back in the 80s. Now that I think about it, like we still hear about nuclear weapons, but nobody talks about neutron bombs now. Mm-hmm. I wonder if was there like a treaty or something that long? I don't know. It's kind of strange. One of those things that seem more present then, but in the late 60s, I guess they must have already been in discussion of that sort of thing.
Either that or they were just using it as a science fiction term and didn't even know what it meant.
Yeah, that's possible too. So we start with the Doctor, feigning surrender and stealing the controls to the Sidrat to get into the Sidrat, which we was how the previous story ended. And then they're inside, and we're having these dimensional controls to squeeze the Doctor down. He surrenders.
Get him out of the TARDIS,
right? Then steals the controls before taking off in the Sidrat, which I thought was very clever. That was a good ruse by the Doctor. But he has to, throughout this, he has to play the villain as he pretends to have switched sides, and he's trying to save the Resistance and his companions while also appearing to work for the Warlord, and while the Resistance thinks he's become a bad guy, and so he's walking this line.
Jamie and Zoe,
right? They obviously they know he's not betrayed them, but he has to walk this difficult line between these sides, and it's well done. I think the writing of it is pretty well done.
I thought this is where the writing was a little weaker because they have the like this character Arturo Villas, who's a knockoff of Pancho Villa.
Yeah.
Who's just, he's an over the top flamboyant character, but he's really slow on the uptake of figuring out that the Doctor is really on our side and this is all a ruse.
Yeah, he's the Mexican bandito stereotype, really. It's right to like where he just believes Zoe as being a resistance leader, like this young girl. Give it credit to her. She takes charge, does the things. She's got agency. She actually really accomplishes a lot here.
Yeah, she gets, since Arturo Villas won't accept her as the deputy leader of the rebellion, since the Doctor's not there at the moment, she gets Jamie dressed up back in his Scottish kilt, but now he's got bandoliers on with grenades on the bandoliers, and it's like, okay, I can buy Jamie as a deputy resistance leader. And
she's feeding him what he needs to say.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned like the war chief is the master, and like the master will eventually do very often, he sees himself as bringing order and peace to the universe or the galaxy. Yeah. That's his aim, is we're going to end the messiness of freedom and liberty, and we'll bring about peace through order and oppression.
Yeah. This is what really convinced, I was already sold on he's just the master, but it's even more obvious in episode 8 when he gets the Doctor alone and starts explaining the plan to him. And it just sounds like a plan that the master's going to come up with. He's allied himself with these people to build an army to take over the galaxy, but he's going to betray him and become the supreme leader himself. Okay, that's all master. But then he says to the Doctor, because the Doctor says, well, why did you take all these people from Earth? And And the war chief says, well, man is the most vicious species of all. At which point the doctor rightly says, well, that simply isn't true.
Yeah.
You know? And the doctor is right. The Daleks, are the Cybermen. There's much worse stuff out there than us.
Yeah.
But the war chief then says, we can bring peace to the galaxy. You see, I'm not the cold-hearted villain you suppose me to be. My motives are purely peaceful. And this is just sounding exactly like the Roger Delgado master.
Right.
The war chief says that he also defends the doctor's life against the security chief's desire to kill him, which is something the master would do. The war chief is planning to take over as supreme leader himself. That's something the master would do. He offers the doctor co-rule of the galaxy. That's something the master has done a lot.
Yeah.
He says we need each other, and then the master's downfall due to his own betrayal of the people he's working, the war chief's downfall because of his own betrayal of the people he's working with, is like, that's exactly what happens to the master. So it's just, this guy just is the master.
Yeah. And we do get, as you mentioned, like several different explanations, moments throughout these episodes where the plane is revealed, the background is revealed. We're not left wondering why and how of all this. They do explain it, including the man is the most vicious. But of course, in as you said, the doctor says that's not true. Although I wonder if we just are the most vicious who are malleable to the processing.
They could have taken care of that on a dialogue level.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like Daleks or Cybermen or whatever. Probably were less easy to take over and control in such a way. But yeah, I mean it works. I mean, as an explanation of why they're doing it, it works for me. Also, a nice plot device that the Sid Rats have a limited lifespan, and that's why the war chief needs the doctor's TARDIS. Although, if the doctor knew TARDISes that well, and he never says, "Oh, yeah, I don't actually know TARDISes that well," but if he did know them that well, he would have fixed his TARDIS by now and be able to, control the directional circuits and land and come and go as he wishes. Well, as he later does.
I think that and this is something they just change in the mythology of the show later on, but I think that there's an attempted explanation here of why the doctor is not in control of the TARDIS, because what he says, he's very impressed by the side rats and says, how did you solve the problem? I mean, those things are very finely controlled. And the only way to build a machine that has that fine a control is if it has a very short lifespan. And then he realizes, oh, you haven't solved the problem. That's why you need me. And so I think that that's meant to be an early explanation for why the doctor doesn't have control of the TARDIS. It's a trade-off.
Right.
The more control you have, the shorter the lifespan of the device is. And if you want a long-lived device, you need one with less control.
Right. I see. Yeah.
Which doesn't make any sense, but I think that's what they were going for.
Yeah. The interesting thing in this one, we see the second doctor at his the most second doctor he is, by which I mean, he's capable and he's smart and he comes up with good plans, but he also sometimes gets frustrated, sometimes gets flustered by people, by the enemy, by people on his own side. Yeah, there's a moment where, like, Russell, the leader of the resistance, doubts his ability to deprocess everyone, and he gets angry at him. He just kind of blows up at him a little bit. I'm doing the best I can, I think is what he says. And it's like, wow. I mean, this is a very human doctor in that sense. It's different especially like in the modern Who, where we get the doctor still has emotion, but he blusters more, but
he's super competent in a way, or comes across as super competent in a way the early doctors don't.
Yes.
And here, this is also when he gets flustered and it's like, I'm doing the best I can. This shows us he's being pushed to his limits in this story. Right. He's really struggling, which is why he ultimately concludes, I can't get everybody home because he doesn't have the kind of control of his TARDIS he needs to get everybody to their home time zone. So he's got to call in the Time Lords.
Right. And there's a lot of guys. I mean, the whole regiments of troops.
Thousands of people. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the TARDIS can move people, but yeah, he doesn't have the ability to do that. And so, when he decides to call in the Time Lords, that's him at his wit's end. That's him like, this is the most dangerous thing for me personally to do, but I got to do it.
I love the way they do it. Because so they have the Doctor just sit on the floor, and out of his pocket, he pulls these 6 white squares, cards, and he kind of lays them in a circle on the floor, and then he meditates. And they don't explain any of this. There's no narration. He doesn't say what he's about to do. He just meditates, and then the 6 cards animate and form a cube. And they later use cubes as Time Lord and other communication devices, as recently as the abominable episode Orphan 55, where Graham builds a cube that takes him to Orphan 55.
Right.
And there are other, like in The Doctor's Wife, the Corsair has a cube that apparently got intercepted. So this is a nice little element in the show's mythology, that you have these message cubes that can deliver messages for you. But as the Doctor is meditating, the war chief is standing right there, and Carstairs and I think Arturo, maybe it's Jamie, are restraining him. But the war chief is just desperate, and he's like, don't do it, Doctor. You can't. You know what will happen. And the war chief, as the Doctor is just sitting here calmly meditating, the war chief's franticness sells the audience on, this is really big and momentous, and bad stuff is about to happen.
Right. And it does, as we'll see in the last episode. But yeah, there is a lot of action in these. There's no, I mean, there's in a 10 episode story, you expect there to be downtime and drawn out things, but in these episodes, there's not a lot of that. One of my favorite action sequences in the whole story is when Russell dives through the door into Smythe's office to shoot Smythe. I mean, that's like the biggest action scene in this. I mean, that was pretty impressive. But there's battle scenes and lots of fighting in this. There's a lot going on. So they really sell it. To put it that way.
Now, one character that we haven't mentioned thus far, other than, I mean, he was in my summary, but is the Warlord.
Yeah.
And who is the head of the race, the Warlords. And he finally shows up in episode 7. So he's had a long intro, where people have been talking about him and what he thinks about things, which is what Orson Welles always thought was the best kind of character intro, where your introduction is delayed, but people have been talking about you for a long time. And when he finally shows up, he's an interesting character. He's wearing like a gray or dark black, or a black or dark gray kind of uniform. It's a subdued suit, and he has a beard. It's a short beard. It's kind of pointy, which is kind of like the war chief's beard, but different. And he's wearing these little, wire rim glasses, and he's very understated. He is not a strutting around shouting villain. And I really I don't know anything really about the actor, but I appreciated his acting choices. Because he does not come across this guy does not come across as Hitler. He's not strutting around yelling. He is, he has these pleasant turns of phrase when he's like, and he's so different than the security chief. The security chief is like a pantomime villain. Yeah. He has these severely clipped delivery of syllables. He will say things like, the feeling is mutual, And it's like, he's got this really bizarre staccato clipped delivery, and the warlord does not. He can be pleasant. He'll be talking to the security chief and saying, I assume everything is going on track, and the security chief is like, up to a point, Lord Copper, there have been some difficulties. And the war chief smiles and says, but they've been overcome, and he's so much more pleasant. And yet he's this evil guy. And right. I like the juxtaposition between his smooth, human, at times pleasant delivery and the fact he's a villain.
Right. It creates the greater contrast when he does. There's a couple of moments where he gets angry.
Yeah.
It creates that contrast. He comes across sort of like a business, executive, like the head of a big evil corporation, but not like the blustering kind, but very reasonable. This is what we're doing. This is the banality of evil. I think is the phrase you often see is he's very measured, very calm. Mm-hmm. When the warlord gets in, enters in, and that hypes up the tension between the security chief and the war chief to the point where when they've captured the doctor and the security chief is using his like monocle headpiece thing to interrogate the doctor, he focuses entirely on, tell me how you and the war chief are collaborating against us. He completely misses the point. Screws everything up. The security chief does, because he's got this idea that the war chief and the doctor are in cahoots, and that he's completely missing what's really going on with the doctor.
Yeah, and he's right that the war chief is not to be trusted. He's just confused the doctor. He's thinking the doctor is part of is willingly collaborating with the war chief, which he's not.
Right.
But he's so obsessed with bringing down the war chief that he ends up harming the warlord's overall purposes.
Right. And the war chief doesn't cover himself in glory in this one because he does the stupid thing of not assuming every room is bugged and is recorded plotting with the doctor by the war chief. Yeah. So you have this whole, distraction for the warlords throughout, and which eventually brings about their downfall.
I also like when the big reversal in the fighting in headquarters happens. The war chief takes one of the futuristic guns and he just kills the security chief. And then Lieutenant Carstairs comes up to him to disarm him, and the war chief just hands him the rifle. And it's like, he just says, that was some personal business that had to be taken care of. And I thought, okay, I can see the master doing that.
That's very master, yes.
Missy or somebody, they could totally do that. Just kill this person to have your vengeance. Okay, here's the weapon. Yeah, I don't need to do more.
Right. I liked the resistance plan, which was to create distractions that drew the security guards out of the control zone so that it left it shorthanded so that they could then come in and take over much easier. I thought that was a clever, well thought out tactic.
It was nice to see them doing that with the doctor not there, because he'd been taken prisoner by this point, and Zoe just keeps the plan moving without the doctor there. It's like, she's like, okay, we got this map of all the different time zones. We're going to have strategic strikes in each time zone that they're going to send guards to respond to, and we can bleed off the guards they've got back at their home base until we move in from our final location in the American Civil War zone.
Exactly. So that then brings us, like we mentioned, to the 10th episode, and the doctor calling in the Time Lords, and his reaction at this point, so once he's sent the message cube off, is he's pretty much decided, okay, now it's time for me to leave Zoe and Jamie, for them to go, the Time Lords to send them back to their time. I'm going to skedaddle off by myself. And Jamie and Zoe are like, no, you're not leaving us behind. We're sticking with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they go running for the TARDIS.
And I think the reason for that is he's concerned about the danger to them if they come with him. Mm-hmm. He knows if he leaves them with the other people from Earth that need to be taken back to their time zones, the Time Lords will get them there safely.
Right.
But he's concerned about the danger to them because he's about to do something really dangerous and go on the run with the Time Lords knowing where and when he is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he doesn't want them to get caught in the crossfire.
And the Time Lords do this very interesting thing where they impose this sort of force field that creates a slow zone as they're trying to run to the TARDIS. And even inside the TARDIS, that slow zone continues. It's interesting, kind of a weird, like maybe you should just stop them in their tracks, but it creates drama.
Also, as an illustration of how powerful the Time Lords are, when they finally start plucking people out of whatever planet we're on to take them back to their time zones, they just fade out.
Yeah.
You know, they like at one point they're saying goodbye to Lieutenant Carstairs, and Jamie turns around. The Doctor and Zoe don't, but Jamie turns around and sees Carstairs waving to him, and he just fades into the mist. He just vanishes. And this shows us that the Time Lords are powerful enough to pluck people out of locations without even needing a vehicle to do it.
Right. And alter their memories, which I wonder if Carstairs and Lady Jennifer ever connect up.
They do. I think they blank their memories of what happened, which is what the Doctor was expecting to happen to Jamie and Zoe too.
Yeah. We do get our first discussions of why the Doctor ran away in the first place.
Says he was bored.
He was bored. That's interesting. They could have done a lot of different things with that, like the Doctor's motivation, but the idea that the Doctor was bored because the Time Lords had become, in his words, kind of like the Q in Voyager, that we get that episode in Voyager where the Q are just, they're so long lived. They never die. In fact, he says Time Lords never die unless by accident.
Yeah. He says we live forever, we can live forever barring accidents.
And so they become bored and indolent and, nothing interesting anymore. And, so he wanted to go and do things, and yet they have this strict rule of non-interference. You cannot interfere with a prime directive, if you will.
Now, so we're getting into some interesting territory here. By the way, the 12th Doctor will eventually, in that Heaven Sent episode, will say the idea that he left because he was bored was a lie, and it was always a lie. He really left for other reasons because he was afraid of the hybrid prophecy, which was a big waste of time. Right. But I don't think that. I think that there's an element of truth there, even in light of what 12 said. I think 2 was also telling the truth. He was bored. It may not have been the only reason he left, but it was part of it. Because he sells it, talking about how, there was a whole galaxy to explore, all these races to meet and worlds to see and stuff. And that generally resonates with the Doctor's character. But what's interesting here is how they developed the concept of the Time Lords from what we already knew. We knew the Doctor was on the run from his own people. We knew that the Doctor's people were technologically advanced and had the secret of time travel. We saw that with the Medellin monk, for example. And yet the Doctor would take Susan and leave their society. Why would he do that? There had to be something wrong. It doesn't matter what it is. You can fill it in different ways. But for our hero to abandon his civilization, there had to be something wrong with it. And so I think the idea that the Time Lords are not the greatest people in the universe is baked in to the show from an unearthly child forward. Right. And then here we get a name for them and we get some more background for them. And we see how they are, the truth is sort of in the middle. They're not bad the way the Daleks or the Cybermen are bad, but they're also not good the way the Doctor is good. And so we see them do things like in episode 10, which anticipates a lot of the future of the show. Like, they take the Warlord there, and then even after they take the Warlord there, his guards use a side rat and burst in and get him. and kill Time Lords and are trying to, like do this snatch and grab with him and bring him back. And it's like, okay, this is like the invasion of Gallifrey in the Fourth Doctor's time, and so it anticipates a lot of what's in the future of the show, including invasions of Gallifrey. But the Time Lords are shown as amazingly powerful. The Doctor, they even after the Doctor gets off of the War Games planet, he tries to escape repeatedly, and they keep grabbing him no matter what he does. And they convince him, even though Jamie and Zoe are not convinced, they convince him he basically needs to give up. And then we see them interacting initially with the Warlord, where they've got all this testimony against him, and they're wanting to know, does he agree with this testimony or does he want to dispute it? And at first he doesn't say anything. And the Time Lords are like, you must answer. We don't want to cause you any unnecessary pain. And he just remains silent. And so one of them has their eyes start glowing, and all of a sudden the Warlord is on his knees screaming about how bright the light is and shut it off, and he'll talk now and stuff. And so it's like they just tortured this guy. They didn't want to torture him, but they tortured him.
What did you make me do that to you?
Yeah. And then after the abortive attempt to rescue him from the Time Lords, they seal his planet. They tell us it's in a permanent force field to keep your warlike race out of contact with the galaxy forever.
Right. Yeah.
And we're going to disintegrate you and your guards, and it'll
capital
be like
punishment.
It'll be like you never existed. And then they do. And they just, as he's going, no, they just disintegrate him and his guards. And it's like, okay, these are powerful, bad people here.
Right.
They're not bad the way the Daleks are bad, but they are capable of doing bad stuff.
Right.
And yet they come across as moderate, because when the Doctor appeals to the fact that you guys haven't been using your power to help people, I've actually been helping people. There is evil out there that needs to be fought. They agree, and they're merciful. They initially let Jamie, and they were going to take Jamie and Zoe sooner, but they let them stay to, say goodbye and stuff like that. Yep. They let them remember their first adventures with the Doctor before they got on the TARDIS and left. The Time Lords acknowledge, we're going to consider, you've made your plea that what you did was justified. We're going to, give that serious consideration. And when they come back, they say, you're right. There is evil out there in the universe. It does need to be fought. And you have a role in helping fight it in the future. But we're not letting you off entirely free because you did break our laws. So we're going to exile you to Earth, and we're going to take away the secret of the TARDIS for as long as we see fit. Mm-hmm. So there's the hint. They're going to let him go one day. This is a temporary punishment. But to teach him his lesson, they're going to take away his knowledge of time travel. They're going to confine him to Earth, and they're going to change his appearance.
Right. And it's change his appearance, which is still, not quite regeneration.
Right. Because it's at this point, what now is called regeneration has only happened once on the show. Right. And when William Hartnell became Patrick Troughton, Patrick Troughton explained it by saying, I've been renewed. Yeah. Which could mean you're the same guy, but you're just a younger version. It could be some kind of, restorative medicine thing that they did. But now they're, okay, we're going to do it again. We need a little bit more of freedom in terms of what we do. So it's an appearance change. And then when John Pertwee comes in, it becomes regeneration, and it's an established thing.
Right. I gather I didn't watch the whole War Games in color, the 90-minute. I gather at that point where he was choosing appearances, they actually showed the 9th, 10th, and 11th, or 9th, something like that?
10, 11, and 10. Well, they show 12 first, then they back up and show 10. Then they show 11 and 13.
I see. Clearly, he didn't react the same way. Like, too fat, too old.
Well, the one that's so in this version, they show him illustrations of what his new appearance could look like. And he has reactions. He's knocking down all the suggestions they're making. He's too old. He's too young. He's too fat. He won't do it all. This one won't do it all. Since none of the modern Doctor Who's are fat, they yank that line. So he doesn't say any of them are fat, but they reuse the other line. So he looks at Peter Capaldi's 12th Doctor and says, well, he's too old. And then he looks at David Tennant's 10th Doctor. Oh, he's too young. And looks at, there are two other lines that get used, but one of them is, for Matt Smith, I believe, is he won't do it all. And then, so he ends up rejecting them all, but that's what they end up doing in the colorized version. By the way, I have more comments about the colorized version, but I'm saving them till the end of our discussion.
Okay. Yeah, because I have comments about just the fact that they showed Capaldi kind of breaks a little bit of the mythology of why Capaldi's face was the 12th Doctor's face was because of the encounter between 10 and the Roman. But that's maybe it's timey-wimey. But it is the first trial of a Time Lord we have here, which is kind of interesting. Like the Doctor is on trial for his actions of interfering with other races, the lesser races, which is what the 6th Doctor ends up doing for a whole season. I think that's interesting that we have the seeds of that here. So that's good. But the Doctor says he's... go ahead.
There's also another thing that I was recently listening to the first of the Joe Martin audio sets for the Fugitive Doctor. And in the bonus materials at the end of the plays, they're talking to, I think it's the writer or one of the writers, if not one of the producers, for the Joe Martin set. And they were talking about something that I thought was really interesting. They noted that there are certain doctors whose times are characterized by particular things. Like the first, he's actually not the first one to be introduced, but the first one that people would think of in that way is the War Doctor. He's the Doctor during the Time War. And then they introduced Joe Martin as the Fugitive Doctor. She's on the run. Her time is characterized by she's running from the Time Lords. But then there's also, they pointed out, the 3rd Doctor. He's the Exile Doctor. And I thought it was interesting here that the Time Lords actually use the word exile. You will stay on Earth in exile for as long as we see fit. And so it's interesting in hindsight to think of, okay, we've got the War Doctor, we've got the Fugitive Doctor, and we've got the Exile Doctor.
It's kind of, I was trying to put myself in the shoes of fans of the time and how different the show switched, how very different the 3rd Doctor is from the 2nd Doctor. I mean, we could talk more about this when we talk about our retrospective of the 2nd Doctor's time, but this transition, he's not going off planet. He's not flying around the TARDIS. He's a very different actor that, Pertwee is very different than Troughton. It's in color, it becomes a very different show. And from the production, from the producer and network perspective, this was a huge risk they took. Because it could have killed the show, because you've never done something like this before.
Right. And they were sensitive to, we're making a radical change in the format of the show where, now we've got unit, we're not going off planet. It's all going to be alien invasions and bases under siege. And they tried to put a good face on it. There's an audio clip from an interview with John Pertwee that pops up from time to time in Doctor Who fandom, where John Pertwee is saying, I have a great belief that it's actually scarier to stay on Earth and have all the threats come to us rather than going to alien planets. There's nothing more, and this is kind of the iconic line from this clip, but he says that there's nothing more terrifying than coming home and finding a Yeti sitting on your loo in Tooten Bec. Which is ironic because the Yetis actually never appear in John Pertwee's time.
Right.
But, and I hear that clip and I'm going, Yeah, no. Going off onto alien planets is really where this show's heart is. That's rationalization.
Right. What I think saved it was the master. Like, you talk about how the war chief is the master, but do we have any confirmation, something from producers who said, wow, the war chief was really interesting, we should make something like that more permanent?
We have more than that, even we have speculation from producers that the war chief is the master. The concepts are just so similar.
Because I really feel like the introduction of Roger Delgado as the foil for the Third Doctor in so many of those stories, not every story, obviously, but so many of those stories really highlighted, like it saved Doctor Who in some cases.
What happened there was they essentially took the idea of the war chief who knows who the Doctor is, even though he says, I know you've changed your appearance, but I still know who you are, and decided, let's make him the Doctor's Moriarty. So he's his equal but opposite. Mm-hmm. And so they essentially took the war chief and said, let's make that guy the Third Doctor's Moriarty.
Right. So in his trial, the Doctor admits his actions that he's being charged with and says, I'm not only do I admit it, I'm proud of what I've done. And so they do sentence him to this exile, and Zoe and Jamie are having them, like you mentioned, having their memories wiped except for their first adventures. It's so bittersweet to see them go because I've become so attached, like a lot of companions, I get attached to them. But especially, I don't know, there's something about Jamie leaving the Doctor because they become like brothers in a sense. I mean, they're so attached. And to see him have to go back to, 1755 is kind of, it tugs at the heartstrings a bit. So it is sad to see them go.
And the way they handle that is, I think, reflects the fact that Jamie is the first new companion that the second Doctor got, and that they are like brothers, and they've been together for basically the entirety of Patrick Troughton's run. Because he doesn't warn them that they're going to lose their memories. They get into Sid Rat, and they're taken back to their own times. And then the Time Lords show clips. These are newly filmed clips, but they show the Doctor clips of them back in their native environments. And so we see Zoe first, we see Zoe because she's the newer companion. Right. We see Zoe on the wheel in space, and she's reintegrating into life there, and it's clear she doesn't remember something big, but she doesn't know what it is. And then the Doctor's like, how about Jamie? And they show us Jamie on the battlefield at the Battle of Culloden, and he's almost shot by a redcoat, but then he turns around and is like, I'll show you, and he gets out his dirk and goes running after the guy. And the Doctor is laughing, and it's like he's going to be fine, Yeah. But I noticed they held Jamie back to do him second because he was the companion that has been with the second Doctor the longest.
It would have really sucked to send him back and then have somebody shooting him in the back as soon as he got there. Yeah, that would have been awful. So, and that brings us to, Patrick Troughton's regeneration, which is him making a bunch of mugging into the camera. for a bit as his face reshapes.
And season 6B is still in there because we've got the two Doctors, which does not fit any prior point in the timeline.
That's with the sixth Doctor and the second Doctor. Yeah.
And other adventures with the second Doctor. So there's still more Patrick Troughton adventures. It's just implausibly, they didn't regenerate him quite at this point.
Right. So, yeah. Yes, we've talked about the 6B problem in the past too. So I suppose at this point we should let's talk about the War Games in color, and then we'll talk about the second Doctor overall. What was your impression of the War Games in color now that you've seen the whole thing?
Okay, so what they did was they took the 10 episodes of the War Games, which is basically like 5 hours worth of material, and they collapsed it into 90 minutes. And they colorized it, they added a few things, and they put a new soundtrack on it. They rescored it. So I have what I like and what I don't like about the War Games in color. Now, overall, I'm glad they did it. it ties up some loose threads that I think are good to do. I like the fact it's in color. They also improved the video quality. It is nowhere near perfect, but it is better than the grainy black and white that we normally see. We get to see the outside of the Warlord's headquarters, which we never get to see in the black and white version. We also get to see, they make the connection between the side rats and the TARDIS clearer, because they show a side rat in flight spinning through space the way we're used to seeing the TARDIS spinning through space. So they make that connection even stronger. We get to see the Warlord's planet being put in the force field, which we never get to see the Warlord's planet in the black and white version. They also add the Citadel on Gallifrey, the big circular bubble city. And we get more of the regeneration of Patrick Troughton into John Pertwee. After he goes spinning off into the darkness, like at the end of the black and white version of the War Games, they cut to a fan edit of the second to third Doctor regeneration, where they've got Patrick Troughton sitting in a chair in the TARDIS, and he starts to regenerate and he becomes John Pertwee. And then we see him land in the forest at wherever Spearhead in Space takes place. And his yearometer keeps switching between 1970 and 1980, which is a nod to the unit dating controversy.
Yeah.
In this, they also added, as the TARDIS is fallen towards Earth there, they add the Nestine, the Auton little plastic probes following the TARDIS down to set us up for Spearhead from space.
Right.
As far as I'm concerned, this didn't do anything to affect 6B, because there's still a jump between Patrick Troughton spinning off into the darkness and Patrick Troughton sitting in a chair in the TARDIS. And that's where 6B goes. So I liked all that. They also did a couple of things that I really like with the Master, or the War Chief. The first one is so they've rescored this whole adventure, new music, except when they have the War Chief, they will play a particular piece of music from modern Doctor Who that was written by Murray Gold, called The Master Vainglorious. And this is the music that they introduced in the scene where the Master has just become the Harold Saxon Prime Minister, and he's having his first meeting with his cabinet, and he gasses them all to death. And there's this kind of swirling string sound that's unsettling, and then it cuts to this dramatic da-da-da-da, 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 which will become a big thing at the end of time, where that's revealed to be music the Master has been hearing. That 4-beat sound is something the Master's been hearing since he was a small child. It's a message from the Time Lords in the future. And so what they do when the War Chief is around is they will play the Master Vainglorious, and they'll have that swirling string sound. And then as we progress further, we start hearing the da-da-da-da, 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 da-da-da-da. And so, okay, this is the producers telling us this is the same character.
Right.
He's here. He's even got the idiosyncrasy if he hears the 4 beats, just like the Master.
Right.
And then when the War Chief has him killed, he has his guards shoot him, and then he says, "Remove the corpse of the traitor," and they pull him away. You hear a sound effect of regeneration starting. And so it's like they pulled him off camera and he regenerated and became Roger Delgado or someone.
Right. Right.
So that's what I liked about the War Games in color. And there's a good bit there. I'm glad they did it. But there are also some flaws. I'm not really a fan of the the second Doctor getting choices from among his modern Who regenerations. I get the joke. I get it's timey-wimey. I get they can do that. I would have mixed it up a little bit with, some classic Doctors in there too. So
maybe even some Morbius Doctors.
Yeah. Well, they would have been in his past, but yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm not really a huge fan of that. They're the fundamental, and then there's also this new music, and I like the Master Vainglorious being used, but there is just too much of this new dramatic music that it just doesn't feel right. And this is the big problem. They just cut out too much. To get it down to 90 minutes, they didn't cut whole episodes, which I had read a misleading statement like saying they cut out all the American Civil War stuff, and they didn't. They included some of it, which they needed to for plot reasons, because that's how the Doctor and Zoe get to the headquarters from the American Civil War zone. And fortunately, they kept Harper. He's the resistance guy. He's a Union soldier who the hypnosis doesn't work on him anymore. And he's still in this, but not much. And that's the big problem. There's just we're lurching from one situation to another. And if you've never seen the original, it's going to be hard to follow.
Yeah.
Because they have characters appear out of nowhere and you don't know who this person is. And then they have characters just vanish, who we've been building stuff up with. And like Von Wyck, one of the warlords, he's in this, he's built up, and then he just disappears from the plot. We never get resolution on what happened to him. Right. So it's too frenetic. It's too cut down. If they'd cut it in half, it might work better, but compressing 10 episodes down to 3 effectively is a 70% cut is just too much.
Right. I watched what covered the first 4 episodes in the full length. And I noticed that, there were scenes where we just jump like all kinds of stuff and like, wait a minute, what about all that? Like, who is this person? Why is this person important? What happened? All the things that they did. There were things you could cut, which made sense to cut. Like, the behind German lines with the German officer trying to convince him. I mean, it was useful, but if you cut it, it doesn't harm the thing. But they were cutting meat and to the bone. Like they were,
it's just too compressed. And the story didn't have, in the 90-minute version, it just didn't feel like it had any room to breathe. Is it worth watching if you've seen the original? Yeah, I'd say it's worth watching. But it's a more enjoyable experience to watch the 10 parts.
Right. So now we've come to the end of another Doctor's.
Yeah, by the way, one other thing that struck me, and I haven't checked to see if Big Finish has done it, but the way this story left things with the Warlords, their planet was in a force field forever to isolate them from the galaxy because they're too warlike.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen when the Time War comes? If I was the Time Lords, I'd drop that force field and say, okay, you've got a nice race, a nice warlike race. We need warriors at the moment. You're working for us now.
That'd be a turn.
Yeah. And so if I were, I don't know if Big Finish has done it, but they should do that. They should, in some of the War Doctor audios they should bring back the Warlords.
That would be interesting. So as I was going to say, we've come to the end of the second Doctor's time, and we've completed another Doctor's run. We've completed the 6th and 7th Doctors in the Classic Who. Now we come to the end of the second. We're very close on the 3rd and the 5th. But the second is your favorite, as you've said.
Yep.
So overall, anything you want to say about the second Doctor's run?
Well, I really like Patrick Troughton's Doctor. I like him. He's vastly more personable than either William Hartnell or John Pertwee. I like him because he is a Columbo-like figure. He is very humble. He uses that. He's very smart, but he's also very humble, and he uses that to his advantage. He gets people to underestimate him. I like he can be like a little child. He can be petulant. I like his older brother, younger brother dynamic with Jamie. I like his rivalry with Zoe, where he gives her props and she is able to kind of run with him on his level and even beat him occasionally. But he's just a great doctor. And basically it was Patrick Troughton that saved the show, because after William Hartnell was the first doctor and they did this radical thing of recasting him in the middle of the show in a science fiction context with a very different personality. He is not trying to be William Hartnell. The show could have died, and it would be forgotten today. They wouldn't have saved any of it.
Right.
And it was the strength of Patrick Troughton's performance that saved the show and gave us another 60 years.
Right. I mean, a lot of what we have for the first Doctor, a lot of those stories were lost. They have been recovered, but no one would have bothered to try to recover them.
Right.
if the show had died after a couple of seasons in the 60s, it would be a footnote in TV history. It's interesting that personability, after the first Doctor, and different from the third Doctor, close to the seventh Doctor in that sense, and the fourth as well. That
except the seventh's colder.
Yes, yeah, but
four is colder in his own way too. Neither are as warm as two.
Yes, right. And we see, they try to recreate the Zoe character a few times to greater and lesser effect. Liz Shaw was very kind of Zoe-like, Sarah Jane a little bit like her, but I think Zoe is the only one I really can think of female companion who really works at the level of the Doctor. Romana, I guess. Yeah, that's true. And I was just thinking about that. But they really set the stage in this second Doctor era for a lot of what's to come. The first Doctor creates the Doctor and the mythos, but the second Doctor really sets into stone a lot of what feels like this is what Doctor Who is. This is a Doctor Who story and a Doctor Who companion. That this tenure really lays that groundwork that the rest of Doctor Who builds on. And so I really enjoy the second Doctor as well. It's sad to see it end, because I would love to see more stories with the Patrick Troughton. But it's been good. It's been good. All right. I did promise we have some feedback, so let's go through that. Going all the way back to our episode 215. So this is several years ago. We talked about a second Doctor story, the Abominable Snowmen. Speaking of the Yetis. Mark writes on YouTube, 2 thoughts, since this is now animated. Yes, the Abominable Snowman is now animated. Since it's now animated, we got to see the spheres roll, the spheres of the great intelligence. Also, I think the reason Victoria just goes into the monastery committing sacrilege is because she's from Victorian England. She has that era's mindset, the Empire and all that. Hip hip, good fellow. Do you think that's what Victoria?
I don't remember that clearly enough to have much of a comment. Obviously, the Victoria being from an upper class family in the Victorian era could have, disregarded local sensibilities regarding sacredness and stuff. I'd have to rewatch the scene. Also, if you're in a foreign environment, you just may not realize what is considered sacred by the locals.
Yep.
It's not like the sacred stuff glows.
Right. From our discussion of the first 3 episodes of the War Games, Paul wrote in with a correction. The red coat is from 1745, not 1715. He even says the year to Jamie, which I think one of us misspoke and then later corrected. Yeah. It's significant because 1745 is when Jamie came from. So that would have been, contemporary to him and would have been an enemy to Jamie at the time. And then from our discussion of the Big Finish story Run with the 9th Doctor, Mark helped me out. He says, here's the quote Dom was struggling with. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. And that's attributed to Benjamin Franklin. Since then, thank you, Mark, for that help. And that's our feedback. Now, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who, including Justin S., Mary S., Scott S., Nono L., and Chris D. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What did you think of the War Games in entirety or the parts we've discussed this time? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com, the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page. Send us an email to drwho@sqpn.com. Visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. And you can watch The Secrets of Doctor Who on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia, where you can also leave a comment. And we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing a Third Doctor story, Invasion of the Dinosaurs.
Oh, boy.
I've seen stills of that one. Oh boy. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Doc.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, I not only admit the charges against me, I'm proud of them. While you've been content merely to observe the evil in the galaxy, I have been fighting against